High inflation, sporadic interest rates, ceaseless expansion of the debt ceiling, blue state exoduses, mass illegal immigration, tax increases, regulation, and more regulation. These phenomena have come to characterize modern America's economic state. Today, I'm pleased to welcome Stephen Moore to the program to help make our situation more understandable. I'm Julie Hartman, and this is Timeless. Hi everyone, welcome to Timeless. I hope that you're having a great week. Just a reminder to hit the subscribe button down below so that you can stay notified every time I post a Julie Noted news video or a Timeless episode. And also be sure to follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Julie R. Hartman. I'm honored today to welcome Stephen Moore to the program. He's an economist at FreedomWorks, which is a small government advocacy group. Mr. Moore was also a longtime member of the Wall Street Journal's editorial board and was nominated by President Trump for the Federal Reserve Board of Governors. He has served as a senior fellow both at the Heritage Institute and the Cato Institute. And he also served as an advisor for the presidential campaigns of Herman Cain and Donald Trump. Mr. Moore, welcome to the program. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Julie. So good to see you. Thanks so much for having me.
So I was looking this morning at the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Now, I've reported on this show that the Bureau of Labor Statistics has not had the greatest reputation as of late for being accurate. Of course, I'm referring to something that happened a few months ago where the BLS said that the Biden administration in the second economic quarter of 2022 created 1 million jobs. And then a few weeks later, they said, oops, retracted it. It was actually 10,000 jobs. So we know that government entity may not be the most accurate indicator of economic activity. But nevertheless, I was looking this morning and it said that inflation right now is at around 4%, which is down from over 9% last summer. Do you think this is an accurate number?
I think that the inflation rate, well, first of all, we had a calamity last year with inflation, where inflation went up to, I think that it peaked at 9.2%, which is higher than any time, certainly in your lifetime. And I'm a little older than you are, as you know, but when I was growing up in the 1970s, we had that kind of 7, 8, 9, 10% inflation, and it was just a death knell for middle-class families. So we're living through that again. Now, inflation rate officially has come down to 4%. I think most Americans believe the inflation rate's higher than that because the essentials that you have to buy, food, travel, gasoline, rent, utilities, those are going up by a lot more than 4%. So I think we are slightly understating the inflation rate right now. By the way, the target that the Federal Reserve Board sets for the appropriate level of inflation is about 2%. So we're still twice as high as what that Fed is aiming for. And I want to make sure that your viewers and listeners understand that the match that lit this forest fire of, rampaging inflation for the first time in almost 40 years was the Biden massive spend and borrow program, all this free money that caused prices to go through the roof.
Mm-hmm. Now, I read that in the 1980s, the Bureau of Labor Statistics made a decision to not count food and fuel, two of the things that you just mentioned, in their calculation of inflation. That seems so odd. Aren't food and fuel some of the most pertinent ways that Americans experience and encounter inflation?
Yeah, so what you're referring to is something called core inflation. And I've never really understand the logic of this, but what they do is they take out the price of energy and price of food and then say, what does everything else cost? Well, that's the primary thing that Americans buy is food and gas. And so that never made any sense to me why you would exclude those. Now, the fuel prices have been falling, obviously from the huge surge when gasoline hit $6 a gallon in many places around the country last summer. Now people are paying about $3.50 a gallon, but that's still, significantly higher than it was under Trump. I think when Trump left office, the gas price was about $2.59 a gallon. So those were the good old days. We have inflation. It's a regressive tax on lower income people. And the best way to bring inflation down right now is to dramatically cut government spending.
Now, the Fed recently did not elect to raise interest rates. Do you think that that was a wise decision? I know that you just said that the way to curb inflation is to cut spending, but we know, of course, that one of the biggest remedies for inflation is to raise interest rates. Why is the Fed not doing that?
Well, the Fed they've raised interest rates now, I think, 10 times in the last year. This is been the steepest increases in interest rates that we've seen, in decades. And so the Fed has to try to pull back all this money that Congress is spending. And so it's almost like they're working at cross purposes. I believe that the most important thing for the Fed to do is keep the dollar stable in value. That's why you have a currency, so that it retains its value over time. But you can't be, my gosh, Julie, since Joe Biden came into office, we've spent and borrowed $6 trillion over the normal amount. $6 trillion, that's 6 with 12 zeros.
Mm-hmm. You have a great PragerU video, Mr. Moore, that I was watching this morning, and you talked about this figure, $6 trillion. And on the PragerU video, which I highly encourage all of my viewers to watch, you said this is more spending than America spent on World War I, World War II, the Civil War, the Cold War, combined. That's the kicker. You said combined.
Isn't that amazing?
It is amazing.
Amazing. Happens to be true. My parents were of the World War II generation, and for 4 or 5 years, we had an all-out military operation to defeat the Nazis and the Japanese. And so almost the entire economy became a military economy. But even then, to win that war, we didn't spend as much money, even adjusting it for inflation, as Biden has. So Biden has come in and really wrecked an economy that was doing really well under Trump. Now, as you know, I worked for Trump. I was one of his senior economic advisors. We had the economy really cooking. It was going amazing. And then COVID hit. And obviously the shutdown of the economy and all these things really put a big dent in the economy. But I'll tell you this, if we just stuck with Trump's policies, we wouldn't be talking about this economic malaise that the country is in right now. We wouldn't be talking about 4 to 5 to 6% inflation. We wouldn't be talking about an out of control border. We wouldn't be talking about the fact that the economy is limping forward at 1% growth right now. We'd be growing at 3 times that amount. And of course, we wouldn't be talking about, a dollar that's being eroded in value through the massive spending and the high inflation.
There seems to be no better evidence for the rapidity with which our economic system has declined than the fact that within just 2 months, earlier this year, 3 out of the 4 largest bank collapses in U.S. history occurred. Now, you're saying that there has been massive spending since President Biden took office. We know that to be true. But what specifically is the Biden administration spending on?
That's the big problem. They're spending them on things that don't have an economic return. It would be one thing if we were fixing all our highways and improving our electric grid system, and if we were, rebuilding our military so that we were kept safe from, rivals. But we're not doing any of that. We're spending all of this money on stuff like income redistribution, food stamps, rental subsidies, dropping $100 bills out of helicopters, and just letting people gather all this free money. It's had a disastrous effect. It causes inflation. It reduces the incentive for people to go out and work. And so, and I left out another big thing that Biden is spending hundreds of billions of dollars on, which is this, what I call the Green New Deal, which is all these massive green programs. We're giving $350 billion to the wind and solar industry and people who make batteries. That's not the role of government to subsidize businesses. That's the role of the business to have an operation that's efficient enough so that it makes a profit.
I had George Gilder on the program yesterday, and he talks about this idea of emergency socialism. All of these so-called crises, you were just talking about the climate change crisis as among them, contributing to the spending. Now, Mr. Moore, how would you respond to some of my viewers who may say, well, it's certainly true that President Biden has spent a lot of money in his time in office, but the debt went up by several trillion during President Trump's time in office.
Yeah, it did. It went up under Bush. It went under Trump. It went up under Biden. It went up under Obama. It's gone up over, virtually every president. I'm not here to tell you. And by the way, I work for Donald Trump. I think he did amazing things for the economy. We had, did a really great pro-growth tax cut that brought a lot of businesses back to the United States. We made America energy independent. So we produced, hundreds of thousands of jobs in the oil patch and the gas and the coal. And, we have more of these resources than virtually any other country in the world. We secured our border. We did deregulation so businesses could do their thing. And we had a booming economy. And so now, but I have to say this, and, I love Donald Trump. He's always been great to me, and I think he was a great president. But even Trump liked to spend money. Politicians love to spend money. It's that simple.
Mm. You keep mentioning the border, which has obviously turned into such a catastrophic issue. According to the Department of Homeland Security, over 5 million undocumented immigrants have entered the country since President Biden took office. I recently was guest hosting for Dennis Prager, and I had Representative Beth Van Dyne on the program, who's from the state of Texas. She serves for the state of Texas. And she said that when President Biden hopefully leaves office in 2024, as many as 12 million undocumented immigrants may have come into our border during those 4 years. What effect does that have on our economy?
Well, I'm very much in favor of immigration generally. I mean, immigrants have been the lifeblood of our economy for 200 years. We're a nation, we truly are a nation of immigrants. And so I'm in favor of legal immigration so people can come here and build a better life for themselves. That's what America is all about. And I want to make sure the Golden Gates stay open. But you have to have ways of, really restricting the, who comes in. We have a right as a country to be able to decide who's coming into this country and who's not. And I think that the fact that the border is so out of control right now is undermined American support for the immigration system. I mean, I think we had a great plan we put together under Trump, which would allowed a lot more skilled immigrants to come into this country, people who have the skills and talents that we need so that we can be the number one economy in the world. But we're not going to be able to do that if we've got a border that is just so porous that anybody who can get to the border can come right in and then claim asylum, and then we don't know anything about them. We don't know if they're criminals. We don't know if they're drug runners. We don't know if they have viruses. I mean, that's not a way for a country to have an immigration system. And so I think Americans are fed up, don't you?
I'm certainly an American who's fed up. And, Representative Van Dyne made this excellent point that I think that we conservatives don't talk as much about, is that not only is this influx of illegal immigration deleteriously affecting the United States and United States citizens, but it's also harmful for the immigrants themselves, who are the victims of exploitative labor situations, often drug and sex trafficking. So even if you look at it from a humanitarian perspective, it certainly seems ill-advised. Now, there's another phenomena, as I like to say, going on. Boy, isn't it interesting how much things can change in just 2.5 years of this man's presidency. Sure, go ahead.
People, a terrible country we are. We're a racist country. We're a homophobic country. And we're this and that. And yet, look at all these people who,
exactly.
I people. I saw the other day a Hispanic woman. She was trying to wade through the Rio Grande River. She was holding her baby over her head, to get to this country. And, the fact is, everyone in the world knows that this is the greatest country in the world, except that the politicians here, they don't seem to think that America is a special place. But I'll tell you, those people who are almost giving up their life to get into this country, it really shows. And by the way, why would Blacks and Hispanics and brown people and Indian people, why would they come here if we're such a terrible racist country?
For all that the left talks about privilege, white privilege, male privilege, educational privilege, the biggest privilege of all is to be an American. And I would point that out to leftists when I was in college and say, again, for all you talk about privilege, you seem to overlook this fact, and it is sickening how many people would want to be in your place.
Julie, it's a great point. And, I've been giving lectures on college campuses for 30 years. And, I put it slightly different, but I like the way you put it. But I say, everyone in this room is an American, either by birth or through immigration. And I said, you've won the lottery of life. That there's 6 billion people on this planet, and there's 300 million of us that are Americans. So we're 1/20th of the population. And yet, where else in the world would you want to be than here? And so you're right. It's, I don't know if I'd call it privilege, but well, let's face it, I consider it to be a great privilege and honor and luck that I was born in this great country, not born in Russia or not born in China or Cuba or all these other nations. And so you're so right about that, I'm so sick of people complaining about this country, and we're not a perfect people by any means. We're human beings, but we are, as Paul Johnson put it, in his great book, we're the first great multi-ethnic country in the world, in the history of the world. And the melting pot really does work. But I don't think the left wants a melting pot. They believe in dividing people, not treating us all as equal Americans.
Mm-hmm. When you just said Paul Johnson, I thought, Mr. Moore, I should have you on again just to talk about Paul Johnson. He's one of my favorite authors. And I've been reflecting on something that he writes about, which is that I don't know if he puts it exactly in this way, but this is what I have gathered from his writings. That one of the best things about America, that is our diversity, has also contributed to its demise, in that, not diversity itself, but the way that we have allowed e pluribus unum, out of many one, this idea that we are all Americans. We have let that identity go by the wayside, and we have allowed multiculturalism to come up in its place. The United States does not have the built-in advantage of having a homogenous ethnic identity or a homogenous religious identity, which contributes to a national identity. And that's a good thing that we don't. Again, our diversity is a beautiful thing, but also it's lending itself now to this situation because we've lost the sense of a unity in being Americans. And so when we don't maintain our national hygiene, if you will, no wonder all of this is deteriorating.
I've been saying for a long time, I talk to a lot of the Republican politicians and the presidential candidates and so on. And I really believe what Republicans should be talking about is a new patriotism, a love of country. It was Ronald Reagan, and I was privileged to work for Ronald Reagan when I was a kid. And
Wow.
Reagan was very famously said that it was, in his farewell speech, that it was divine providence that put America here as a beacon of freedom for the rest of the world. And I believe that. I believe it was divine providence. And, that is quite a legacy that we have to carry on. And I'm amazed at how many, especially young people who have the, quote, privilege of going to the best colleges and going to the best schools and growing up in wealthy households. And they think America is a terrible place. And so it breaks my heart, actually, because there are a lot of people who want to come into this country and they give up everything they have to be able to become an American. Again, I'm not saying, look, we have stains in our history. Of course we do. We have the history of slavery. We have all sorts of, we're not a perfect people, but we have become the one place on earth that gives everyone an opportunity to succeed. And most places in the world, that's not true.
Mm-hmm. Well, one source of hope appears to be that there is a mass exodus from blue states to red states. This is actually one of the things that I was going to bring up before we got off on this tangent. And by the way, I love it. It was a great tangent and necessary, and really necessary for people to hear. But still, my gosh, and you talked about this in your PragerU video too. There have been 1 million people in California who have left, and Texas has gained 1 million people. Just to give one state and another state as an example, that's not even factoring in all the other blue states that have been left and the red states that have gained population. What are the long-term economic implications of this demographic shift?
Well, Julie, I really believe that this is the most important thing that's happening in America that all Americans should be paying attention to. So you have, by the way, some of those numbers that you reported, those are all a little bit of out of date, actually. Just in the last 5 years, 5 to 10 years, California and New York combined have lost well over 3 million people, 3 million people. And on net, that is 3 million more people have moved out of New York and California than have moved in to those states. Now, you can understand why people might want to leave New York, but California is one of the most beautiful places in the planet. Nobody leaves California because
Agreed.
of the weather. You have mountains, you have beaches, you have sunshine, you have, wonderful climate. Why are people leaving? Because California has moved so far to the socialist left. And they're going to places like Texas, and they're going to places like Florida and Tennessee. And so what is happening is the center of gravity of America has shifted from the Northeast to the South. And also in the mountain states. You have states like Idaho and Utah and Montana that are growing like crazy too. But people are disgusted with the high taxes, the high regulation, the terrible schools, the high crime, the graffiti, the homelessness. I mean, go to San Francisco or Los Angeles or Portland or Seattle and see what the quote progressives have done to those cities. It's heartbreaking. I'm from Chicago. Chicago's crime is out of control. You can't even go outside through some of the best neighborhoods without worrying about being shot. So this is what progressivism does. It destroys places. And I want to make sure that, the places that work like Florida and Texas and Tennessee and South Carolina and Utah and Iowa, those places really need to be the models for the rest of the country. But I'll tell you this, those blue states like Illinois, Connecticut, New Jersey, New York, California, they're being bled to death. They're losing their greatest asset, which is their people.
Is a recession coming?
A recession?
Yes.
Did you say?
Mm-hmm.
I sure hope not. I worry about it, as any economist would. I'm not going to predict a recession because I never want to underestimate the resilience of the American people and American businesses. But my God, the last 2 years have been just awful for the economy. Prices are up 16% from when Trump left office. You've got people getting poorer every month because the prices they pay for goods and services are higher than their wage increases. So that makes, if your costs go up faster than your income, you're getting poorer and poorer and poorer every month. It's so ironic because Joe Biden's actually trying to take a victory lap on Bidenomics. And yet Bidenomics has been a catastrophe. No president, we started out this conversation talking about the massive increase in the debt. If you and I went out drinking one night, we drank and started dancing on the tables and having a wonderful time, and then just ran up the credit card, it'd feel great when you're doing it. And then you wake up the next morning, and you can't get out of bed. And that's sort of the way I view the U.S. economy if we continue on this path. But look, if the American people vote for a Ron DeSantis or a Donald Trump or a Nikki Haley for president, I think we could turn this economy around in a heartbeat.
This is an awful question to ask, but I can't help but wonder it. Earlier this month, as you just said, Congress agreed to raise the debt ceiling yet again. We just since 1980 have been raising it. A lot of Americans, myself included, start to wonder, well, does the debt ceiling matter if we can just every few years keep raising it? What's your response to us?
Well, first of all, I do think we should have a debt ceiling. I think we should require Congress to raise the debt ceiling when they want to spend more money. And so that's number one. Number two, when I first came to Washington back in 1984 or 85, the national debt was about 1.8 trillion. Now it's 31.8 trillion. And Julie, it's headed to 50 trillion of debt. Again, these numbers are so gargantuan, nobody can make any sense of it. But I think instinctively Americans understand that when you're further and further and further into debt, you're further into a real crisis. And so we've got to start controlling expenditures. We don't have a revenue problem. We have an overspending problem in Washington. Now, one of the fastest growing areas of the federal budget is interest on the national debt. So in other words, we're not even getting any services for that. We're just paying for all the services and all the things that government gave away, 5 and 10 and 20 and 40 years ago. So Does this make me very nervous? Yeah, you better believe it did. And by the way, the Biden response to this, all we have to do is raise tax on rich people. And that's ridiculous. The rich already pay 40% of the income tax, and the top 1% pay 40%. And what are we gonna have the rich pay all the taxes? Are we gonna take away everything that they've got? And by the way, even if you did take away everything they've got, you're still not gonna be able to pay the nation's bills. So we've got to start getting the spending under control. I believe it is one of the most imperative things for this country. And the second thing, most important thing, then would be to fix our tax system so we have a flat tax like Steve Forbes talked about. And then the third most important thing would be to fix our school system by having a system where the dollars follow the students and the backpacks, not the teachers unions and the professional educators. But those are kinds of things that are the top priority for our country to continue to perform.
As I listen to you, I think I'm 23 years old. Oh gosh, what challenges are ahead for my country?
The question I have for you, because
Sure.
you're 23, is I don't understand why young people are voting for these policies. I mean, Julie, I'm going to be dead. I'm not going to be paying for this debt. You are, and your colleagues are. I don't understand why they don't understand that we're bringing up the debt. Instead of bequeathing to you a stronger economy, we're bequeathing to you a economy that's going to be saturated in red ink.
Well, the funny thing, Mr. Moore, for all that people my age criticize America, they actually have a staggering faith in it because they don't seem to worry about the problems that you have outlined. It actually shows that I've been using this word privilege, America has always pulled through for us. And so we think, foolishly, that it will continue to pull through. But I find that dichotomy, the stated dislike and hatred of America, but also really the comfort that people seem to derive from it because they're voting the way they do. That is the closest explanation I can give you. But I'm trying to turn it around, my friend. I'm trying to tell young people to vote the other way.
I mean, you can't keep bringing up debts, and you've got to have a free enterprise system, and you got to give people opportunities and better schools and better education. And why they're not even teaching history anymore in the school books, or at least the history they're teaching is science fiction. It's not the real history of America. The real history of America is one of incredible triumph and incredible prosperity. And every generation, what is the American dream? What is the definition of the American dream? That every generation will leave the next generation better off, and that everyone in this country can achieve their dream, their own personal dream. And sometimes when I look at our country right now, I think a lot of people don't believe in that anymore.
Well, they need to become educated about the most important issues. And I want to use this opportunity to publicize Mr. Moore's newsletter. You can go to committee-to-unleash-prosperity.com, and it's a daily email, you said, with several bullet points pertaining to the economy and politics.
Yeah, and I hope people will get it. It's called just go to the website, Committee to Unleash Prosperity, and that's, by the way, Art Laffer, Steve Forbes, myself, and Larry Kudlow. So that's quite a foursome. And what we do is we give out the best information on the economy. And, you don't have to take my word for it. I mean, I just talked to Newt Gingrich the other day. He said, Steve, this is the first thing I read every morning because I find it so helpful. And you can read it in 5 minutes. It's not, the average. Sometimes it's just a chart. Sometimes it's just a couple paragraphs. We like to make fun of the New York Times and the Washington Post because, folks, that's the other really so much changed in my lifetime is, Donald Trump is right. Most of the news you read and see on TV now is fake news. It's fake. They're lying. And so we need to have discriminating readers and discriminating Americans who understand the difference between fact and fiction. The left loves to talk about, quote, follow the science, but most of the science they're peddling isn't science at all. It's just opinion.
Yes. Well, we live in an Orwellian time. Gender affirming care is actually gender denying care, just to provide an example. They are a people of fiction indeed.
I think you've reached, I've been saying this for the last year or two, that we've reached peak woke, and that people really want to get back to the traditional values of this country. And, I'm kind of old fashioned, but I do think that we should have this idea that you're going to have 8-year-olds have sex change operations and things, I think is just disgusting and outrageous. And we're going to sterilize our kids? Really?
Apparently we are at this state. But again, there are people like you and I who seek to fight it. Thank you, Stephen Moore, for coming on to the program. And again, I encourage everyone to check out committeetounleashprosperity.com. I'll see you all soon. Take care.